All right, well, thank you everyone so much for joining us today in celebration of Julie Lythcott Haims' most recent book, Your Turn, How to Be an Adult. It's so wonderful to have both Julie and Malaika here in conversation today. So before we jump into this exciting dialogue, I want to ground us in the time that we're living in. MOAD stands in solidarity with Black Lives Matter in recognizing and condemning the ongoing systemic violence against Black people. We honor and mourn the senseless murders of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Tony McDade, Casey Goodson Jr., Patrick Warren Sr., Andre Hill, Dante Wright, and so many others who have lost their lives in police brutality and racial injustice, including those whose names we do not know. We want to acknowledge that MOAD's commitment to racial justice is ongoing, and as such, we will continue to say their names and to hold space and honor these victims. I also want to acknowledge the spaces that we're occupying. Though we're gathered virtually, many of us are settlers, immigrants, or descendants of those forcibly brought to this continent. And our institutions were founded on the exclusions and erasures of the indigenous peoples on whose lands we are located on. It is with deep respect that MOAD acknowledges that even in a virtual space, we reside on unceded native lands and thank the indigenous peoples of the Bay Area and beyond who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. Now, it is truly an honor to have you all here again to celebrate Julie Lythcott Haims' newest book, Your Turn, How to Be an Adult, which was just released last week on April 6th. Julie has been an ongoing supporter of the Museum of the African Diaspora. We have previously presented programs with her. She was in conversation with author Susan Straight in the fall of 2019. It's also a joy to have this gathering because both Julie and Anna were actually in conversation together this February for the release of Anna's debut book, The Three Mothers. And again, I also want to thank the Mosaic community of the California Independent Booksellers Association who helped co-present that event and also is supporting this. And a special shout out to the bookstores Cafe Con Libros and Underground Books, who again are amplifying these events that we're doing and really, helping celebrate the importance of supporting Black authors today and always. And so before I hand it off to Julie and Anna, I will give brief introductions of each of them and then pass it off. So Julie Lythcott Haims believes in humans and is deeply interested in what gets in our way. She is the New York Times bestselling author of the Anti-Helicopter Parenting Manifesto, How to Raise an Adult. Her second book is the critically acclaimed and award-winning prose poetry memoir, Real American, which illustrates her experience as a Black and biracial person in white spaces. Her third book, Your Turn, How to Be an Adult, was just released on April 6th. And Anna Malaika is a PhD candidate in sociology at Cambridge University, where she also earned an MA in multidisciplinary gender studies. Her undergraduate degree in anthropology is from Stanford University. She is a passionate writer and speaker on issues of gender and race, an educator and a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant. Anna, again, her first book, The Three Mothers, How the Mothers of Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, James Baldwin, Shaped a Nation, was recently published in February of 2021. And so with that, it's my honor again to kick off this conversation between the two of you and pass it off.
Thank you so much, Nia, and thank you, Moad, and thank you, Kaliba, and everybody who made this event possible. And a special thank you to everybody who is tuning in. And I wish I could see your faces, but I hope you feel the energy. We wanted to first start, it's something that's really important to both Julie and I, that we continue this acknowledgement that Nia started of the lives that have been lost to the injustices of white supremacy. So we want to take a moment of silence, especially to think about Dante Wright. Thank you. As we begin, it is my incredible honor. You've already heard Julie's introduction, and many of you have already heard about her. I just want to say a little bit more about my personal relationship with Julie, who I met as Dean Julie over 10 years ago. And I can't believe it's been over 10 years ago. But just to share a little context, I was a freshman on what's called our Frosh Council, which, just freshmen from each dorm are elected and they get to go and meet other freshmen. And one of the honors of the entire experience is that we also got to meet our Dean of Students, who just a couple nights before we saw give a speech where she welcomed us to our new school, our new experience, and started to teach us already what it meant to now become adults and become our own people. And Dean Julie did this incredible thing where she would memorize each name of every Frosh Council member. And my full name, everybody, is Anna Malaika and Triwa Asari. Very long. And she remembered the entire thing and she said it in front of all of my classmates. It was a moment where she not only acknowledged me, but acknowledged each of us and really said, you matter. You're somebody that is going to make a difference here at this university. We see you. You're not just a part of a larger number, but you are unique and you are going to be celebrated. And Dean Julie has done this in so many different ways. And she's done it in showing in her own life an example of somebody who is always true to herself, who always thinks about the ways in which she wants to grow. And, being a dean of students at Stanford University is definitely considered an incredible success. And at one point, Dean Julie said, this is not what I want to be doing with my life. I have other dreams. I have other passions. And she again led by example in pursuing her career as a writer, which she has done so beautifully and so successfully. So I just want to thank you for that, Julie, before we start this conversation, and just tell you how grateful I am for our relationship, for your mentorship, and for the ways in which you led us with so many examples. And now with this beautiful new book.
Rookie mistake. It's only been 14 months and I'm still speaking when I'm muted. Anna, that was so beautiful to hear. And I want to thank Nia and Moad and Mosaic and Kaliba for putting this event on. Your introduction was so lovely. I can't believe it's been over 10 years. And I was intentionally trying to signal you matter to me, to all of the students. In particular, I wanted to pronounce a name that clearly had African components. I wanted to pronounce it correctly. I wanted to show other people that you make the effort to learn how to say folks' names. And so I remember trying to make sure I was saying your name fully and honoring you and your ancestry and trying my darndest to get it right from the start. So that is a precious memory for me as well, meeting you. And I'm overjoyed by the life you are leading, the person you are. Your book, we're not here to talk about your book tonight, but it's right here, everybody. The Three Mothers, how the mothers of Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and James Baldwin shaped a nation. This is about the unseen characters who really not just birthed these men, but raised them up and held them up and shaped their ideals and helped them persist and inspired the heck out of them. And so anyway, we got to be in convo about your book. I love what you're doing in your writing and in your life. And I'm just honored that you've agreed to flip the tables now that my book has come out to talk about mine. So thank you.
You're the absolute best. That is just a testament. Once again, she's always sharing space, always sharing the spotlight. But we are going to focus on you right now. And that leads me to my first question, which is at the very beginning of the book, you mentioned that it was hard for you to say, I'm going to be the one who writes this book. This kind of moment of saying, who am I to do this? Who am I to tell other people how to be an adult? So I'd love if you could walk us through that process, as well as even maybe the obligation you felt to write this book, but also how you reconciled with that fear, that little bit of uncertainty that said, who am I to do this? And why you did decide to write this book about adulthood and why you felt it was needed right now.
Yeah, thank you. So we're talking about my book, Your Turn. I'm flashing it up here since we are doing this on video, on Zoom. It's big, don't be daunted. Adulting is hard. You can't TLDR it. You can't boil it down to 10 tips. Look, for any writer in the audience, any author you can appreciate, I had signed a book contract. My publisher wanted this book. I said I would write it. And then my memoir came out first, the book on race, and that was easy. I had written that book and they were going to publish it, but then they said, we want to publish that, but also this other book that will be a sequel to your first on the harm of helicopter parenting. And I agreed to it, but then struggled to find my way in. For 3 years, I failed to write this book, primarily because I didn't feel like an adult. I thought, who's an expert on adulting? Either we all are or nobody is. Come on, it's just a stage of life after childhood. Who would purport to have expertise? I did not want to come across as some wise sage on a hill telling other people how to lead an adult life. And so I just tried and failed to come up with some structure that my publisher would have approved. They refused 3 efforts that I made. And finally, Anna, I remembered the voice of myself as a college dean who would sit with someone like you in Frosh Council or at the student union or in my office hours and listen well, try to create space for a human to open up and feel safe and seen and supported. And I would try to listen well. I tried to summon that voice, which is hard to put on a page because a page is a one-way conversation. But I thought, I felt comfortable in that role. I certainly care deeply about what young adults are going through. I try to listen well. I try to read between the lines and listen to what they aren't saying as much as what they are. How can I put that listening and that compassion and that frank advice that I might give if they ask, put that on the page? And ultimately, that's how I got in. And that's the voice of the book. But what got me there, I think, in terms of the velocity or the, kind of what pushed me was I care so much about this generation of folks, millennials, who have been saying for quite some time, I don't want to adult. I'm scared to adult. Adulting is hard. My heart, maybe it's because I'm a mom of a 21-year-old and a 19-year-old. Maybe it's because I worked with so many of you as a dean. My heart is going like, oh no, come on, you're all right. You're gonna be all right. It's hard, yeah, but it's also amazing. And why haven't we shown you that? In some ways, I am responding on the behalf of Gen X, my generation, and the boomers before me, to an inadequacy that your generation feels that I think is frankly largely our fault. We've managed to make adulthood seem inaccessible or unattractive, and I wanted to own that and sort of bring you back to this. Yes, you can. You've got this, and I've got you.
That's so beautiful. It reminds me of this fear that many of my peers feel, that I think I even felt at certain points, of reaching adulthood and thinking that it's some sort of end point, that there's nowhere to go after that. So can you speak a little bit to, it's something you talk about extensively in the book, but the mindset that kind of needs to switch for many of us when we're approaching adulthood, that it's not, I'm just reaching an end point, but instead a journey that we're already always evolving. And something you say is, I'm still becoming me, you're still becoming you. So if you can share a little bit more about that wisdom of our mindset around adulthood.
In a lot of communities, childhood today is lived according to a checklist. You got to go to this school, take these classes, get these grades, do these activities, do these sports, this community service, et cetera, to get into the next thing in life, which is college. For many young people, you grew up that way. And I'm here to say adulting is not like that at all. There is no track. There is no wrong track. There is no right track. There's no track. It's this wide open landscape. It is a mindset. I am living. I am a human being. You're not a human doing. It's not check the box. I've done that. No, you are being a human. And that entails taking care of business, by which I mean, look after your body and your mind, look after your obligations, earn some money so you can pay the bills for the things that matter to you. You're in charge of yourself. You're no longer somebody's child on their shoulder, on their hip, being held by the hand. They have let go of your hands. They don't love you any less. They still love you and they want you to come home for meals and produce grandchildren one day, probably. But you're not being handheld anymore. You're not a dog on a leash being tugged here and taken there, made to soar through these hoops. It's on you. It's entirely up to you. And I can see why that feels scary, because a wide open landscape with no path and it's all up to me. It's like, where do I start? Well, from improv, we learn start anywhere. From the D school, design school at Stanford and Silicon Valley more broadly, we learn bias to action. Just do something. A step in any direction gives you data. How did I feel? Did I like it? Did I hate it? What did I like about it? You begin to learn more and more about the environments in which you want to work, the type of work you want to be doing. You learn more about yourself. What matters to me? Who am I? What are the identities I want to claim? And with whom can I create connection, relationship, community, so that I feel a deep and abiding sense of belonging? I'm describing a journey that takes some time. And then here's the thing, because I'm talking to you at 53 years of age, which I can hardly believe me. I'm like, wow, did that go fast? Okay. Once you figure that self out, what am I good at? What do I love? Intersection. Find some humans to be in relationship with, chosen fam, lover, friends, work, right? Once you've figured that out, you're getting your insecurities all sorted out, you're attending to your mental health and you're learning differences and you've got some money put aside for your retirement. Anna, you just want to be able to live as long as possible. It's not about being done, arriving at a place. It is this tremendous journey. And once you feel that delicious sense of, I think I know what the universe has in mind for me, you just hope your time lasts a long time. So I think that's one of the big messages. It's like, God, I'm just so excited for you. It's going to be hard and it's going to be amazing. It's going to be magical. It's going to be mystifying. It will at times be scary. Things like pandemics will happen. Things like police shootings will happen. The climate is heating up. There's systemic inequality. Like, there's so much wrong. And yet, look into the eyes of somebody you love and experience joy. It's just an exquisite phenomenon, this thing called life. And I'm delighted to try to help folks younger than me say, heck yeah, sign me up, instead of, I don't want to, I'm afraid. Like, no, don't be afraid. Come out here. It's amazing.
I love that. Okay, well, with that in mind, I would love to know more. And if you could tell us, this audience, about your personal journey into adulthood and the moments that maybe signaled for you, I'm an adult, or I'm becoming an adult. Or did it feel more like something that happened and you didn't notice it? Of course, retrospect is 2020. It's probably easier now for us to see and the dots that connected into you becoming the adult who you are today. But if you could take us on that journey a little bit more, that exciting journey, that magical, beautiful journey, and even some really tangible examples of Julie saying, wow, I've arrived in my adulthood.
Well, I want to acknowledge that it's not magical at the outset for everybody. There's a whole set of people who have to adult sooner than they want to, and sooner than anybody would want them to. And those are people whose childhoods are partially robbed by a difficult life circumstance, by an incarcerated parent, by a parent who falls ill. Maybe a parent dies, maybe a parent loses their job, maybe there's a natural disaster, some circumstance or set of circumstances that mean this child has to earn money. This child has to take care of siblings or older family members. This child has to make dinner. And I want to just acknowledge, because I was just on this like romantic Hollywood, like, adulting is amazing. And it has the capacity to be. But I just want to acknowledge, particularly because you've asked this question about when did it happen? When did it start for me? For some folks, it starts at 9 or 11 or 13, sooner than we would ever hope. For me, I grew up relatively privileged. My father was a physician. My mother was highly educated as well. I went to college at Stanford and went off to law school and got married along the way to the person to whom I'm still married. Best thing ever happened to me, Julie Lythcott Haims. And we got married, big fancy dress. I graduated law school and those things didn't make me feel like an adult. Those things still felt like the checklist, you know, did that, did that, did that. Anna, we had a fire in our moving truck, moving from the East Coast where I was in law school back out here to California. Got a phone call saying your moving van caught on fire. So sorry. We don't even know how bad it is. We won't know till the van gets to San Leandro in the East Bay, and you can inspect your stuff and we'll deal with a settlement. That was my, oh my gosh, I'm an adult moment. I was 26. I was married now 2 years. My parents were with me and Dan as we got the news. They were compassionate. They were loving, but there was nothing in them that said, oh no, we have to handle this. My dad and mom didn't say, give us the phone number. You know, we'll fly out there with you. We'll do, it was none of that. They just hugged us, expressed tender empathy, and then we sat down and had dinner. There was nothing any of us could do right then. And my parents weren't going to do anything, actually, you know, in the days to come. They were signaling, you've got this, sucks, but you've got this. And Dan and I knew, you know what, we're going to handle this. And we were scared. Our scrapbooks were in there, newlyweds. I mean, he had written me handwritten letters every day the first summer we were together. Those letters were in that van. We were sad and worried and overwhelmed by the kind of what's going to happen next. But there was some little tiny spark. You know, when you light a fire and at the beginning, it's just this tiny little thing. There was this tiny fire and we sort of blew on it and blew on it. And it became this flame that was like, we're going to handle this. It's ours to handle. This is some shit and it's our shit and we're going to take care of it. And we did. And it made us feel so grown up. When you came to our house once we had replaced our furniture, we were like, this is our place. We made this, we figured this out. Deeply satisfying. And that's what difficulties and tragedies and disasters, you know, they say that which doesn't kill us makes us stronger. And there's a lot of truth to that. We feel this deep satisfaction of, you know what, I took care of business. I handled it. It creates this psychological, wow, look what I'm capable of. And it means you're more skilled and more strong for next time. So that was my adulting moment. I think for some people it's gradual. You know, for some it's not until someone's dying. It's like a parent is unwell or dying or a friend and you go like, holy crap, where are the adults? And then you realize it's me. We are the adults. Some folks collectively have that, you know, experience, that understanding over the course of their teens or 20s. So that's when it happened for me. I can tell that one of us is frozen. La la la. Is it me that's frozen? I'm still here, everybody. I'm going to get on Facebook and see what is happening. Okay. I'm still here. Okay. Yes, I'm still talking. I can see myself on Facebook. So my mouth is moving. Okay, Anna's gone. Okay, folks, we're having a little technological difficulty. Hey, that's adulting for you right there. So just hang out and Mia's back. Okay.
Yeah, hopefully Anna will be joining us in just a second. I saw her video popped off, but
okay.
I think she'll probably be joining us in just a second.
Okay.
But it's been such a lively conversation so far. I'm learning so much. And as we started at the beginning of this, I already was taking notes just about life advice in general.
Awesome. Well, one of the pieces of advice I'll give is how important it is that when we're thinking about what am I going to do with this adult life? What am I going to do in my life? We often have in our heads all of the expectations of our family, our extended family, our whole ethnic community, our peers saying, you should do this, you should do that. And I counsel in the book, you got to ignore that noise in your head that is the voice of others. They have no idea what's right for you. I think it's arrogant as heck for somebody else to tell you what to do with your life. Okay, I'm getting a message here from Anna. Let's see. There we go. Yes. Okay, we're trying to help her get back on. Right, so you've got your own thoughts about what do I want to do with this one life of mine, this one wild and precious life, which is how the poet Mary Oliver put it. Okay. So I counsel you in this book to try to drown out the noise of what everybody else expects and listen for your own voice, which is in there, desperate to be heard, the voice of your spirit, the voice of your soul, your gut, your mind, that's telling you, this is what I'm good at. This is the work that makes me feel overjoyed, excited, devoted. This is what I love. You're listening for that voice. And the better you get at recognizing what your own voice sounds like, which, by the way, is often strongest when you're miserable, when you're desperately unhappy in a relationship or in the workplace or in a community you live in, that misery, or when something bad happens, you get sick or your hair starts falling out, you get high blood pressure. That's when you say, okay, fine, I am miserable. I am miserable. I'm going to make a change. And I'm sort of advocating for, don't wait for the misery to make the change. See if you can't discern before the bad thing happens. I'm not happy. I want to switch course. You start listening to your own voice. You get really clear about what your own voice sounds like. Then you have to find the courage to honor it, which means making decisions in furtherance of what you know you want from this life. And that's when it can get really challenging with family, because family's there saying, wait, keep your options open. That's their way of saying, I don't like your ideas. Okay. And that's where the young adult has to say, folks, I appreciate you. I love you. I respect you. Whatever language you've got that tells your folks, something respectful, say, I understand, you have plans for me, but I also have plans for me. And I'm old enough now to make those decisions. And even though you might not be able to understand what I'm up to, please trust that you've raised me with good values. I've got a good head on my shoulders. I have a good sense of myself. I need to give this a try. And even if you can't understand what I'm up to, I hope that you'll root for me to be successful at it. That's a powerful conversation to have with your folks, whether it's about grad school or about a job or about the person you're in love with. It's your life. It's one of the dominant messages of this book, Your Turn, How to Be an Adult. It's your life. It's not up to anybody else. It's up to you. Okay, I am just checking in to see where we are with our event. Anna is still having trouble getting in, and Anna and Nia are working that out, and I'm just gonna keep going. Because actually the last chapter of my book on adulting, it's called Keep Going. Above all else, keep going. When stuff goes wrong, you just try to figure it out and keep going. And that's what we're doing here today. You think you're here for a conversation with me and Anna Malaika Tubbs. She was here. She's had some technological difficulties. She's coming back, but in the interim, I am here talking about my new book, Your Turn, How to Be an Adult. This wonderful event sponsored by the Museum of the African Diaspora, MOAD, here in San Francisco. All right, the next thing that I want to tell you is, in addition to stop pleasing all these other people, these voices in your head, because they have no idea what's right for you. Something else I want to say is you got to start talking to strangers. Now, I know in childhood you were told, don't talk to strangers, but I'm here to tell you that's not useful. That's not a skill. Don't talk to strangers is not a useful skill when your whole life is full of strangers when you leave home. Okay, I'm subverting this childhood norm in my book. There's a whole chapter, start talking to strangers. Why? Because some of those strangers are going to become colleagues, neighbors, friends, chosen family, okay, confidants. Some folks will remain strangers, and you still need to know how to talk to them respectfully, kindly, but advocate for whatever it is you're about. Humans are a very social species, and we have to get much better at talking to one another, at dealing with difficult conversation, communicating effectively, working out difficulties, achieving compromise. We have to be better at that in our personal lives and in the workplace, because humans are everything. We need them in order to thrive. You know, there's research that says that at the end of your life, if you had a nice, long, healthy life, what predicted you're having a long, healthy life was not your cholesterol level when you're my age. Welcome back, Anna. It's How deep were your friendships and relationships in your 50s? That's the greatest predictor of longevity. I'm just here speaking about the importance of connecting with humans and developing really tight bonds with humans, because at the end of the day, that's probably the most important resource you'll have in your life. It's not your money, it's not your house, it's not your car, it's not your job. It's the humans that you can count on and who can count on you. So
Absolutely.
welcome
I'm
back.
so sorry about that. Zoom just said no longer will you be on. But that was, you were giving such a beautiful answer, and I'll have to catch up later in the recording. But
Okay.
my next question was all about, you have always been somebody who I've seen as being so intentional, whether that's, as we talked about at the beginning, in my own experience in meeting you, in your work as a dean, and the way you approach your writing and all of your books, and in your relationships as well. And so I know there was so much intentionality, and I can feel that intentionality behind the chapters and behind how you crafted this book and how you chose the examples of people you were going to highlight. So I want to hear more, and maybe this is kind of a selfish thing as an author, but can you tell us about your process and the intentionality behind crafting this book in the way that you did?
Absolutely. So I've already said I had a hard time writing it. And one of the battles I was waging was, my editor was saying, people want to hear your voice, which I was struggling with. I was saying, I want to tell other people's stories. I want to just put example after example of adulting on the page, and in the aggregate, we'll have a book. And my editor said, your readers of your first two books want to hear what you think, Julie, not the stories of these other people alone. So we achieved a hybrid where it's part memoir from me, part self-help tips that I've written, but part stories of other people that I interrogate and narrate on the page. And I chose, look, I'm a Black and biracial queer woman, and I am tired of reading fiction and nonfiction that doesn't contemplate that I might be the reader. I think it's high time, it's well past time for writers to be accountable for not letting whiteness just be unnamed on the page, like character A, character B, character C, character D who had a skin of brown. Thank you, author. You've just told us to assume something about characters A, B, and C. You're telling us you know what their race is. You're signaling, I think you know what I think, right? This sort of implicit assumption of whiteness as the norm and only naming race when it's the other. I subvert that in this book. Everybody gets a race. Everybody gets gender and sexual orientation and other identity markers that they felt were important to them personally. And I've assembled this group of humans from so many walks of life, highly educated and hardly educated, and middle class and poor and working class, and upper middle and wealthy people, and Black folks, Asian folks, Latino folks, Native folks, white folks, all genders, just people who are immigrants and children of immigrants, and all over the country regionally. I've just tried to do my best. It's an impossible task to ensure everybody feels seen, but I have deliberately pulled stories that have been kept on the margins for centuries. This is my way of saying, yes, all lives do matter, or certainly should matter. And since all lives don't matter equally in our American narrative, in our rhetoric, in our policing and policies, and in our books, I'm doing my small part to try to bring everybody into the center of these pages. And the two categories I didn't mention were people struggling with mental health difficulties, people with learning differences, neurodivergent folk. That's also a part. When I speak to the diversity in this book, I also very much am inclusive of those experiences. So that's what I've done. And I'm hoping that every reader will at some point have the reason to say, oh my gosh, she had me in mind when she wrote this paragraph or this page or this whole chapter. That's my goal.
You can even see that in the quotes that you choose to begin each chapter. There is such a range of diversity, from
Thank
Little
you.
Nas to other artists or other authors. I found that to be such a beautiful addition. And can you tell us a little bit more even about, how do you narrow this all down into 13 chapters? And then even thinking about, again, you were wanting to be as inclusive as possible, but I'm sure there were many things that you couldn't include, mainly because it's already a very lofty, you know, big book not to be afraid of, like you said, but a beautiful one filled with such rich diversity. But were there things that you had to leave out in addition to the question about how did you narrow it down?
Well, part of what happened was we had a pandemic, and I finally found my stride to write this thing in the summer of 2019. And I was making a go of it, writing and speaking for a living and writing this book. And then March of 2020 happened, and my kids both came back home and they were having their issues. And my 82-year-old mother needed a whole lot more time and support. And I was writing a book, and I ended up finishing it during the pandemic. This is my way of saying, if it had not been a pandemic, I think I might have been able to be more intentional about what was in there and how every chapter was shaped. We were up against a clock. This book was already late. I've already signaled that, right? It took me too long to write it. I couldn't get in. And so by this point, the publisher was like, yes, you will have this book and it will be done. And it's going to come out in April 2021, despite the fact that it's a pandemic. My way of saying some of this was out of my control, which is a theme for life. Like, you got to know that as a young adult, so much will be out of your control. You do the best you can within the constraints you've got. Another author would have said, you know what, we're going to call this chapter relationships, and we're going to call this chapter work, and we're going to call this chapter, you know, learning how to iron your shirts. I don't know. I didn't do it that way. I thought that was dull. I wanted to sort of be more creative. I wanted to tell good stories and weave these themes about work and relationships and self-care and money and taking care of business throughout. I mean, the big themes are, you got to have agency. That's the sense of, I can do the task in front of me. You got to have resilience, which is, I can cope when things go wrong. There is not a chapter called agency or resilience. These are themes that are woven through. Another big set of themes are, most adulting books are about how to do stuff, how to iron a shirt, how to change a tire, how to pay your taxes. Awesome for them. Go look at YouTube. All the videos to teach you those things are there. I do hit upon a few things you got to learn how to do in my book, but my book is diving into the deeper philosophical things, like, why don't you want to? You know, you have to want to adult. You know, you have to. If you're wealthy and being handheld by your parents or your parents' staff, you might not have to ever adult, meaning fend for yourself. And you'll be rich and totally depressed because you're not doing the work to propel your life forward. And so I get into these issues of what's keeping you stuck. Why might you not want to? Why might you not have to? What can we do to get you over those hurdles so you are actually out there in life adulting?
That's really the difference, I would say, in this book in terms of what people might expect if they haven't read your first book, that it isn't this instruction manual where, you know, maybe we've gotten used to these kind of self-help books that are, this is how you do things, A, B, C, D, but more so this is an acceptance of how we're all going to approach things differently. But there's a mentality, like you said at the beginning, a state of mind to embrace, which I think you just so beautifully explained. My next question thinks about, and really comes from my perspective as a millennial, and how our generation is really known for following our feelings. It's something that sometimes we're made fun of for, where we say, I don't want to be at this job anymore, it's not fulfilling me, or we move on to the next thing. It's very rare for us to, you know, stay at a job for several years. If you see somebody who's worked at Google for like 5 years, they're called, you know, like veteran Googlers. Like, that is really weird in terms of our generation and our mentality around it. And so I'd love if we could talk a little bit about some of the pros and cons of that mentality of feeding ourselves and thinking about our feelings and what's giving us life in that moment and what's making us happy in that moment, but also how you think about that compared to needing to have financial stability and maybe own a home someday, or thinking about a progressing economy that's getting harder and harder for people to have these things. So I'd love to hear more about that balance.
Yeah, it's definitely balance. And I think balance is another major theme of the book. So here are the pros of y'all. You're the most diverse generation in American history. You've grown up with social and emotional learning. You have a sense that everybody does matter, that every identity is valid. My generation, older than us, people didn't grow up with that. So y'all are insistent, like, your emotions are valid. You know that regulating one's emotions, like validating and regulating one's emotions, that's sort of a really important thing to do on the daily. We didn't grow up with any of that. You are more emotionally mature and more accepting of a difference than any humans in this country ever before you. And that's enormous. Then you go into a workplace that's old fashioned, that has certain ways of being, and you're like, oh, hell no, this is not going to work for me. And I think the balance is, okay, if it's intolerable, speak up, try to make change. If you can't tolerate it, yeah, leave. But if you develop a track record for never staying, that's going to catch up with you, because employers want to see, like, you can push through difficult things. You are reliable. You are dependable. You don't just say, oh, I'm tired, I'm out. That's not a very mature way to behave when others are relying on you as a colleague to help kind of get the work of the company or the organization or the government, whatever it is, done. So it's balancing, is this an opportunity for me to grow and kind of lean in and learn and maybe get some good out of this, even though there's also some stuff I really don't like? Or is the I really don't like piece big enough that I need to start looking for my next thing? I don't think it's good for anybody constantly to say, oh, I'm done, I'm quitting, I can't stand it. I just got to go take care of myself, because you'll develop a reputation for somebody who's unreliable. You won't learn the skills of persistence. You will miss out on the joy that might have come if you just gotten over the newbie part and stuck it out. And you won't accumulate, the financial stuff we're talking about, like stay in a job, earn a salary, save money, right? At some point, you do need to be paying attention to the fact that your 60-year-old self might not be super thrilled if your 20-year-old self just flitted around through jobs kind of casually here and there through your 20s. You will regret that.
That's perfect. Okay, as many other questions as I have, it actually is time for us to transition. But before we open it up to audience Q&A, want to invite you to do a reading of this beautiful book. And as Julie is spending time sharing these words of wisdom with us, audience, this is your time to think about questions you might want to ask. And then we'll welcome you to do that in just a few minutes.
Thank you. So this is a reading from Your
Whenever you're
Turn.
ready.
This is from Your Turn, How to Be an Adult, Chapter 1, which is called Adulting. What exactly is it? This book isn't about the absurdity of the legal distinctions of adulthood, or about, I'm sorry, I'm like paraphrasing because I'm trying to enter a hold on, I'm starting over. I'm trying to enter a chapter partway through. Okay. This book isn't about the absurdity of the legal distinctions of who is and is not an adult. It's a compassionate beckoning into the freedoms and responsibilities of adulthood, whatever your task at hand may be. The definition of adulting should be one that applies to everyone throughout time and that withstands changing societal norms and macroeconomic forces. The best I can come up with is this. You begin as an infant, completely cared for by others, and at the end of life, you're completely cared for by others before you die. It's those sweet, sweet years in between that are the adult years. A vast set of years, if we're lucky, in which, barring having a significant disability, we are capable of caring for ourselves. That's pretty much it. I know you want to succeed at it, but you may have been misled about what that means. A successful life is not about getting into a certain school or having a certain job or career or about how much money you have. It's not about perfection, making a singular noteworthy achievement, or having the most followers. People will hold these things out as the finish line for you to cross, but forget that. There is no finish line. Your work will feel most fulfilling if you've spent some time figuring out your unique interests and talents, and you go out there and get better and better at doing that stuff. And much more important than the work you do is how you behave with humans. Research proves you'll feel happiest during life and at its end if you find some small set of humans who know the real you and who love you and support you no matter what, and whom you love and support in return. In terms of actually doing the adult thing, it's less a checklist and more a process that you'll get progressively better at over time. It requires balancing a lot of competing things. By the time this book is done, we'll have covered a lot, but there will still be a lot you don't know. Part of the adulting mindset is about getting much more comfortable with not knowing, with figuring things out, and with keeping going. Being an adult will become the most complicated and yet the most natural thing you've ever done. Sometimes you might long to be a kid again, not to be the actual diapered or play dating child, but at least to feel taken care of. Is it scary out there in the wide open landscape of life where you fend for yourself and where anything is possible? Yeah, but you have to, and you must want to, and you need to learn how. It's your turn. I'm the latest person to try to tell this story. You're the latest to listen. The reason we keep telling these stories is that all of us have to learn it to survive. Nobody before you knew how to do it either. We're all winging it, full of shit and fear. Sometimes I am still terrified too. Cue the baby animal video. But you and I can conquer that fear. And when you feel the fear again, you'll conquer it again. You'll be okay. And while we're speaking fundamental truths, let me also say that adulting is at times delicious. Believe it or not, this adulting thing, you'll want to.
Beautiful. Bravo.
Thank you.
Okay, our original plan was that I was going to be the audience Q&A, but because I had to switch to my phone, it's a little difficult for me to see that. So Nia, if you could help us by reading some of the audience questions, I would really appreciate that. And I'm so sorry for my connection issues.
Sure. So right now we're still waiting on some questions from the audience.
I have more.
If you have more questions,
for it.
I'll relay them as they come.
Okay, that's perfect. Well, Julie, I would love if you could tell us, back to the theme in terms of thinking of still becoming, what are things that you're still figuring out now? I think your vulnerability is something that is always welcoming and allows us to be honest with ourselves, because you are so honest with us. So what's something you're struggling with now as an adult?
Anna, I had some really frustrating encounters with the medical profession when I was in college. I went into the Stanford Student Health Center with a bronchitis, a cough that had been lingering for weeks, and was told that I weighed too much and needed to go on a 1,200 calorie diet. And that really scary, dehumanizing, shameful. I'm a heavy person, but I was a whole lot lighter than I am now. And yet this doctor felt that that was the focus. Anyway, point being, really made me afraid to seek healthcare for decades. I never really went as a wellness practice. I only went to urgent care when something was bad, because I was afraid of being judged again. And here I am at 53, and the pandemic has woken me up to some of my pre-existing conditions that make me more likely to be harmed by the virus if I was to get it. And I've decided I want to live, and I'm going to take my health more seriously. I'm going to stare at it in the face. I'm going to go to the doctor. I'm going to do the tests and this and that. And so I took myself off to the doctor in January, I think, and discovered I'm not dying. I mean, we're all, in the grand scheme of things, you're born and then you die. I mean, I'm on that journey, but I'm not, my fears were not sort of borne out. And I've discovered that staring into the face of it, like, okay, I might have some issues around my sleep. Apparently I might have sleep apnea. That really is a thing, and I got to deal with it. And people say that when you do deal with it, your life feels changed for the better. Well, my life is pretty darn good, but if it turns out that I could get some help with sleeping and sleep better and get more oxygen into my brain, imagine how many more books I could write, So I'm here to say I decided to turn and face the thing that scared me. And I discovered that life did not end when that happened. I've got some tools, I've got some resources. And in the book, I even say, there are some health issues I'm not dealing with. And I knew that in putting that on the page for readers, as I'm saying to them, take care of your body, take care of your mind, I needed to turn that advice around and take my own advice. So that's definitely an important part of my 50-something journey.
Thank you. Thank you. That was powerful. I saw a question come in. I think Nia's going to read it to us.
Yeah, so we have 2 questions that have come in that are kind of on the same topic, asking about the audience of this book and whether it's specifically solely for millennials or if there's some gems in here for some of the folks who are more middle-aged. And someone's referencing for people who are middle-aged, who are starting to finally listen to their inner voices, asking about what kind of advice or wisdom they might find in this book.
Believe it or not, it turns out it's for all of us. Once you're over the age of 16, 17, this book is for you. I didn't know that at first. I mean, I wrote it, I thought, for the 18 to 34 set, those who were not ready to adult. But what happened is, as people started to read it last couple of months, older folks, I heard from people who changed jobs because they were finally listening to that inner voice. I heard from people who were getting out of relationships or committing to relationships because they realized, like, this is wrong for me or this is right for me. This is a book that is putting a mirror up to you and saying, like, just tell yourself what you're seeing in response to whatever stories and advice is on the page. So you're never too old to read this book, as I've learned. And I'm also learning that parents of young adults who are reading it with their young adults are having an amazing experience. The young adults are saying, hey, can we please talk about chapter 5? The book is acting as a portal, or acting as it's pushing the door to communication open between parents and adult children. It's a facilitator of conversations that might otherwise have been hard to start. So I'm delighted to say, if you're resonating at all with anything that we've discussed at this event, I think you'll find that the book is for you.
Definitely. I completely agree. I could see myself rereading it later on in my life, and even thinking about when my son is older, finding gems once again. So I completely agree with that answer. And I think we have time for 1 or 2 more questions, but we'll start with at least this first one.
Great. Well, thank you for that answer, Julie. This next question is thanking both of you, saying thank you, Anna and Julie, for this wonderful conversation. They're asking, how do you deal with being forced to become an adult as you get older, when you never had a childhood?
Yeah. I don't know if the person who wrote this question was here earlier when I was acknowledging that some folks end up having to adult far sooner than feels fair because things went wrong in childhood. So I feel for you. My heart is really full for you. I think number 1, naming it is step 1. Just naming it to yourself, as you've already done. Obviously, you've then taken step 2, which is say it out loud to strangers like me and Anna and Nia and everybody here, right? You're putting it out there, and that's validating it for you. I think step 3 is asking yourself, what do I want? I can't go back in time and be 8 years old again, or 12. I can't go back and undo those circumstances or incidents or experiences. But what can I do? This is a powerful reframe from I can't to I can. What can you do? You've acknowledged you didn't really have the childhood you deserved. What do you want to do about it? What would you like to say? I'm doing this because I didn't get it in childhood. Maybe you're longing for some downtime. You don't want to be work all the time. Can you set things up financially or in terms of structure at work such that you can take some time away that is a big breath of air, like 6 weeks? Is that somehow doable, feasible? Maybe you're longing to travel. Be intentional about that. Set your bucket list in place. But many of us think bucket list is when I'm 80 or by the time I'm 60. Maybe you need to pull your bucket list horizon in and say, because I was deprived, denied a decent childhood, I need to be rewarding myself a little bit more now. I think fundamentally you're shifting your mind to I deserve this. don't wait for someone else to tell you you deserve it. Okay, that's not likely to happen. We have to be advocates for ourselves, particularly in these circumstances. You get right with yourself. I had it bad. I deserve better. I'm going to claim that for myself now. Name it, claim it, do it. I'm excited for you.
Wonderful. Well, that brings us to the closing. And I just want to say thank you again to all the audience members, to everyone who made this event possible. A special thank you to Julie for the wisdom, for the compassion, for the vulnerability that this book is filled with. This conversation is just the tip of the iceberg of what you're going to dive into. If you pick up this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful book, please make sure you go ahead and buy it. Support MOAD, support your independent bookstore, support Kaliba, and please support this incredible author. And there are going to be many more books to come, especially if we get that sleep apnea figured out. So I'm very excited for that. And thank you for the honor of allowing me to be your conversation partner tonight.
Can you, who are here, imagine the joy of a former dean being interviewed by a former student? It's just incredible. I feel the sort of parental love without any of the responsibility for you, right? I'm not your mom, but I care. I've had that deep care for you. It's a joy to watch you live your life. And thank you so much for being in conversation with me around my new book. It's wonderful to be on this authorial path with you. We're both making our way. And I'm grateful to you, grateful to Moad, Nia, Mosaic, Kaliba, and to everyone who spent this hour with us. Thank you so much.
And I want to thank both of you again for this wonderful conversation.
Bye, everybody.
I've learned so much, and I encourage folks to continue supporting the museum. This is just one of many programs that we're doing. So I encourage you to take a look at our website, moadsf.org. Keep showing up. If you are able to financially support the museum, donations are always welcome. You can do so again through the website or via your phone by texting 56512 and typing MOAD-SF. I also put a link to a program survey in the chat if you have just a few moments to fill that out. We love to hear your feedback. It's great to pass that on to all of our program participants. And so it just helps us know how to best support our communities. And again, thank you, Anna and Julie, for this lovely conversation. I encourage everyone to read this book. Again, it's available at the Moad bookstore. And I hope that everyone has a wonderful rest of your evening. Take care.
Take care, everyone. Thanks. Bye. Bye, Anna. Bye, Nia. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.